Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. I hope you're having a lovely weekend so far, and if you're watching this on Sunday, happy Sunday. We started off the week by heading on into central London. Once every couple of months, Chad and I like to go on in to get some new clothes. Obviously with autumn, winter coming up, it's the time to sort of refresh your wardrobe, so we headed on into our usual place. Chad and I both decided probably at the start of the year that it's time to sort of start investing in our clothes. So instead of buying from high street shops, we invest in really good quality sort of tailor-made trousers, especially. So we actually head on into Savile Row. There's a specific shop called Cad and the Dandy, which is where we get our trousers from. They're really, really lovely. This isn't an ad, they're just really good. I think Chad then picked up some coats from another shop. So we were quite successful in Savile Row. I won't bore you with most of the purchases that we made when we went into London, but I thought I'd show you one of the things that I really, really love. And I've never really bought from this company before, but if you've been to Florence, you'll know that Florence is home to one of the oldest pharmacies in the world, and it's called Santa Maria Novella. It was founded in, I think, 1221, so it's over 800 years old. And as I mentioned, if you've been to Florence, you've probably either seen it, walked past it, or gone to it, because it's one of those really, really visited tourist places in the city. But Santa Maria Novella has shops in central London. There's one in Piccadilly Arcade, which is just off Piccadilly Street, and there's also one in Burlington Gardens, which is basically just opposite. And I've never been in. I went to the one in Florence, but again, I didn't really smell any of their perfumes. It was more just to sort of see the actual building. But I thought, let me just pop in and see what they had to offer. You'll all know that I am a really big fan of Penhaligon's perfume. One of the main reasons that I love Penhaligon's is the fact that you can apply the fragrance in the morning and by the end of the day, it still lingers on your skin. And that's pretty much what I want from a fragrance. Not only do I want it to smell really, really beautiful, but I want it to last. Some fragrances can be extremely expensive. When you're paying that much for something, you want it to last a really long time. But I have heard really good things about Santa Maria Novella. So I actually popped on into the one on, I think it was Burlington Gardens, and I told the lady in the shop what sort of scents I like. I like a really woody scent. Sometimes I like leather, a whiskey, oaky sort of smells. I really stick to that sort of genre of perfumes. And she immediately recommended me the scent Incenso. Now, I've just done a bit of Googling. I think the top notes of this are cardamom. I think the mid notes are like pink pepper, and the base notes are sort of incense and more woody smells. This definitely smells more herbal than Penhaligon's fragrances, but it's a really, really beautiful sort of herbal, woody, spicy smell. And I think this would be a really, really lovely winter fragrance for either you or your partner. Really, really beautiful scent. It is rather expensive. I think the smaller bottle comes up at £160, and then the 100ml bottle is £240. So it's sort of similar pricing to Penhaligon's, but I will give you my feedback on this. I haven't worn it at all yet, so I will let you know if it lasts the same sort of time as Penhaligon's, if it's worth the investment. But I did spray a tester on myself on the day, and by the end of the day, I did still smell of the same perfume. So I shall let you know my thoughts on this, but I thought it's a really beautiful brand, and it sort of ties back into my Italian heritage. We've been to Florence, we've seen the pharmacy and the shop in real life. So if you're heading into London, I'm not sure where the other locations are. I might sort of leave them down below if I can. Definitely head on in there and check out their scents. But that was the only perfume that we picked up. And then obviously when I was talking to the lady in the shop, who was extremely helpful, she also recommended some other scents that she thought that I would like. And obviously the same sort of fragrances were coming up. It was the tobacco-y, woody smells. So we actually picked up this fragrance, Tobacco Toscano. Sorry for my really English pronunciations of the Italian words. But we decided to pick up the shower gel in this fragrance. But it's a really beautiful glass bottle. Obviously all the sort of similar old style pharmacy details on the bottle. And this is a really, really beautiful tobacco-y smell. It literally smells purely of tobacco. There's not really any other notes in there. So when you're lathering yourself up, you do smell like you're in a whiskey lounge, but it's really beautiful, and it does linger as well. I think if you want to smell really, really pungent of the same fragrance, obviously use a shower gel, then layer up with some like moisturizer, preferably a scented moisturizer. They also do sell their body creams in the same sense, so I might pick up some of those. But that was all we picked up. I will leave them both linked down below. But definitely head on into the stores, check them out. I also came away with loads of testers, so I'm definitely going to check out all of the tester scents to see which other ones are my favourite. But the rest of the day, we're just going to head on into the kitchen and do some baking. I'm really in the autumnal, wintry mood right now, so we're going to make some comfort food. I think we're going to make a coffee, cardamom and pistachio cake. I have made it before for the channel, so we might do an in-detailed process of baking the cake. I'm not too sure, but let's head into the kitchen and start baking. Alright, so as I mentioned, today I'm making something a little bit indulgent. It's a coffee, cardamom and pistachio cake. It's one of those cakes that makes you feel like you've made an effort, but really it's just a glorified sponge with a bit of spice and some fancy nuts on top. It's also really good for using up the bits in your larder or your cupboards. You don't really have to go out to the shops to get anything. You should have all of this at home. So you'll need the usual suspects: butter, sugar, eggs, flour, some cardamom pods. I like to use instant coffee, double cream, icing sugar, and of course pistachios. So nothing you'll need to go on a pilgrimage to find. So first things first, oven on at 190 degrees Celsius and grease 2 cake tins. I always forget this bit and end up panicking halfway through, so best to get it done at the start. And then once we get to the first step, it's as simple as creaming together your butter and sugar until it's pale and fluffy. I like to use an electric mixer for this because I cannot be bothered to whisk by hand, so definitely do this as a quick cheat. And then once the butter and the sugar combine and they become fluffy, you then have to add the eggs one at a time. Very tedious, I know, but it does make a difference. Once that's in, you want to add your strong coffee and the ground cardamom. The reason I like to use instant coffee is because our coffee machine isn't strong enough for really strong espresso shots, but if you do have a coffee machine that gives you a really thick crema, then definitely use that. But for this, I'm just using instant coffee. And then this recipe couldn't get any simpler. All you have to do next is fold in the flour, and that's literally your batter done. This is why I like this recipe so much. It's a foolproof recipe that has worked for me every single time. And the last step for the batter is to pour it into the tin, smooth the top, and then bake it for around 20 to 25 minutes until it's golden and springs back when you touch it. Definitely keep an eye on this. Sometimes it does need a little bit less than this time, but just keep an eye on it and make sure you don't overcook it because you still want it to be moist on the inside. And then once it's out of the oven, let it cool completely before you even think about filling it. Patience will save you a very big mess later. Trust me from my own experience. So one of the reasons I love this cake is because it does feel quite light. It's still very indulgent because you get the coffee, the cardamom and the pistachio flavours all sort of combining, but it's not as thick and as dense as a chocolate cake. And I think the filling also plays into this. So for the filling, we're just going to whip some double cream until it's started to hold its shape. Don't take this too far because you will then create butter. I also did try and make butter during this, which is why you've noticed a quick outfit change, because if you've ever tried to make butter at home, it becomes a bit of a mess. If you want me to include that clip next week, then definitely let me know. It's literally one ingredient to make butter, and I think more people should do it, so let me know if you'd like to see that. But once you've whipped your double cream and it's ready, add the icing sugar, some more cardamom and chopped pistachios. You want to whisk it again very lightly, but you want it thick enough to spread, but obviously still soft. For this I'd say test, because you can add more or less cardamom, pistachios, depending on your preference, but it's one of those combinations that feels really balanced, a bit of texture, a bit of fragrance, and not too sweet. And then all we have to do is spread the pistachio cream over the bottom layer, pop the top back on, spoon over the coffee icing and let it drip down the sides naturally. There's no need for perfection, it's meant to look a bit homemade, or at least that's what I like to say. I'm clearly not a professional baker, but one of the things that I think lets me down in baking is my icing. So the icing here is just icing sugar and coffee. You want to mix them together until smooth and slightly runny. I think this one could have been slightly runnier. And that is the coffee, cardamom and pistachio cake. A light aromatic cake that's just as good with your morning coffee as it is in the afternoon with a cup of tea. It's simple, it looks lovely, and it tastes even better the next day, if it lasts that long. A few days later, I was very excitingly invited to visit Nye Timber's estate in West Sussex, a rare opportunity to see behind the scenes of one of England's most celebrated vineyards during harvest season. It's not the sort of place that's usually open to the public, so being there, walking through the vines, and even getting to harvest the grapes myself felt quite special. The whole estate has this calm, timeless quality, steeped in history and surrounded by that soft, early autumn light. I spent the whole day with the team, and their passion really came through in everything they said. There's so much care and tradition behind what they do, and I learned a huge amount just listening to them. Luckily, I recorded most of it, so I thought it would be nice to share some of that footage, as it's not often you get to hear directly from the people who make such exceptional wine.
Where we ever planted vines, all the way back in 1988, and I'm going to do this bit more as a walking and talking tour, purely because I don't want us to miss our pickup. We're going to start very quickly here just because it's so important to our history. Stuart and Sandy arrived in 1986, planted their first vines in 1988, and produced their first vintage in 1992 with a Blanc de Blanc, of which these are the original vines. The reason I say most is because you'll notice, a willing volunteer, vines like these two in this row here, quite spindly, quite thin, and that is because they are considerably younger than the vines that surround them. And this is because while these vines had a pretty good start to life, they had a pretty terrible midlife, let's call it teenage years, and then were kind of picked back up by Brad and Sherry. And because of that terrible middle period, their lifespan was cut considerably. And so they are starting to reach the end of their lifespan. They're around 35 years old now, but we are doing the far greater time-consuming and also capital-consuming process of single vine uproots and replants. Normally, you just kind of take out the entire block, replant the entire block, save yourself a lot of time, save yourself a lot of money. We are trying to hold on to these vines for as long as possible. Now, while winemaking is a romantic business, it is still a business. And so it will reach a point where this is just no longer economically viable, because as a vine gets older, much like a person, gets wiser, more complex, but its productivity drops. And so with these vines, tend to see around 700 to 900 grams of fruit per vine, which is just less than a bottle. Generally, you're looking at roughly a kilo per bottle, and so these vines are not particularly productive. And complexity in sparkling wine, at least at the grape stage, isn't that important. It's reasonably important, but nowhere near as much as in still wine. And so we're focusing far more on yield, and so these are more of a historical importance to us than they are necessarily of a production value. And secondly, to that view, not only is it beautiful, it's also quite important to the terroir that is available to us. So these three rows are what are known as three-row Pinot. They were the first plantings of Pinot Noir, and they were replanted in 2005. Fourth row onward was planted in 2012. This was effectively, as with the Chardonnay, planted on a champagne model. When Stuart and Sandy came here, no one had done what they wanted to do. So they basically took a carbon copy of champagne, slapped it on English soil, and it works. We have similar enough climates that you can produce pretty good fruit by doing that, and such decent wine as well. But it is not tailored to the specific climate that we're in. Primary differences: we're at a higher latitude, we have less sunlight intensity, and we also have quite a lot more water. Now, if you think about vines, they're basically organic solar panels. They just want, well, plants in general, they just want to absorb sunlight. Now, if you are on a flat plane, because the Earth is curved, the light is spread out over a decent amount of area, unless you're on the equator, which we're, or at least to my current understanding, not. The higher up you go, the more that curvature increases, and so you want to basically have an angled slope that means the light hits you as flat on as is possible. Hence, you can kind of see it there, and you'll see it as we walk down it later to the stretch tent, we curve down so that the vines are angled towards the sun. Also south or southwest facing, again to increase as much sunlight as possible. Now, vines don't need full sunlight to produce good fruit. They need around 1/3-ish, and so cloud cover like this is fine. Obviously, harvest has already happened to this vineyard, so not necessarily applicable here, but we're looking to have slopes to combat things like frost, to allow water runoff, to allow for poor soils, and to allow for good sunlight. But the main thing that Brad and Sherry changed, because all of that happens in Champagne as well, from here to here, is they dropped the vineyard density, which just refers to the amount of vines per area, generally vines per hectare. Here it's around 8.5 to 9,000. Here it's around 3.5 to 4,000. And they also increased the row spacing. Now the row spacing was increased just to allow you to get more machinery down the row, makes your management far easier. We do still hand pick everything at night timber, and there's a lot of hand pruning as well. But for things like mass pruning, especially when the vines are fully grown during summer, you just run a pruner along, kind of has like arms like this that pop over the rows, trim the vines uniformly, and then you can do hand pruning, green harvesting, etc., winter pruning by hand when necessary. And the reason you drop your vineyard density, it's still kind of visible, but lots of leaves falling off the vine. As you can see, these vines kind of intermingle, and because of this, they shade each other. It also decreases airflow running throughout the vine. Lots of moisture in this country, lots of rot, lots of disease. You want to combat that. By increasing your spacing between your rows, you have less shading, therefore more ripening potential. You have more airflow, especially amongst the fruiting zone, and so you combat things like rot and disease. You increase your potential ripeness, all of which are good things. One of the only negatives of this is yield reduction. So we produce around 5 tons a hectare, would be pretty normal. 7 tons a hectare would be good. To put that in perspective, you can look towards 13 to 18 tons down in Champagne, and so there's a significant difference in terms of yield. In terms of hectolitre production, we get around 25 on a good year. Champagne can be around 55. So if you're ever looking on a shelf at an English wine that you've not heard of before, and you're like, wow, that's quite expensive, there is a reason for it. It's because it has to be, and quite a lot of the time people will be making a loss on that figure anyway. Slightly nullified by night timber, largely because of the fact we're at a relatively large scale of production now, and so we can kind of manage those margins slightly more easily. But if you're looking and thinking, do I go with this English producer? Don't I? And you've been told great things about it, and it looks really good. Give them the benefit of the doubt, because generally those prices are well justified. So just unclip that, and then you are able to use your very sharp secateurs. When you are harvesting, you're going to be harvesting from the middle row today. Harvest into the crates. So essentially, just to harvest your fruit, feel free to move a crate closer to you if you need to. Drop the crate into the fruits, or place the crate into the fruits.
Right, so I'm here with Kathy, and we are currently picking some grapes. I don't really know what we're doing, but let's pick some red grapes. Okay, so apparently these are Pinot Noir grapes. We've been told not to get the ones that look a bit funky. That's a bit funky, so I don't know what to do. There's not that many. Kathy, go on, you demonstrate.
my expert.
I'm gonna say, you look very aesthetic in your dress as well, so it's a good bunch though, well done. And then we've got a little crate. Apparently we're trying to fill this. We've got 10-15 minutes, so
It's going to take a while.
we're gonna get to it, yeah. Right, so we've just picked all of our grapes. I think we won. You can see all the little crates of grapes that everyone's picked. Free work for the day.
This year, earliest ever start, and that's thanks to the warm and dry summer that we had. Vines respond to the warmth, and everything moves forward. So we started earlier than we ever have before. For the most part, we're very excited about the quality this year. We haven't completely escaped the knock-on effects of some of the September storms that we had, but generally 2025 is going to be regarded as a very high quality, one very high quality in terms of a vintage. For the hours of the morning, everything is pressed, we start cleaning, the day shift returns and they finish off the cleaning, and then grapes arrive and we go again. So from a production team, we work together as one team in one building at the wine.
seen renovations since, I'm sure you'll see. So quite special to us. It is the oldest remaining sort of building on site. Now has of course recently gone through some pretty amazing excavations as a
Right, good morning everybody. It's currently a few days after I went to the Knightimber estate. I may have forgotten to talk to you. When I was there, I was really carried away and I learnt so much stuff, but I don't think I spoke to the camera very much at all. So apologies for that, but I'll do a quick catch up now for you. I feel really privileged to have been invited to the Knightimber estate, especially during the harvest season. It's not something they do very often. I think we were one of 3 rounds of people. There was like a press day before, a marketing day when I went, and then the day after was for like the international buyers. So it was really interesting being included within the group of people that are there for the particular time of year, which is their harvest. But they don't really open to the public very often. So it was really cool to be invited and see basically the process of making sparkling wine in England, which I've never seen before. I was very impressed by the team. Not only were they very knowledgeable, but they were so passionate about the whole process of winemaking and the whole industry in general. So it was really lovely listening to them speak. And I'm not a history nerd at all. I think you can tell that. But I really enjoyed learning about the history of Knightimber. It dates back to 1086. It's featured in the Domesday Book. The estate itself was actually owned by the Crown at one point. King Henry VIII owned it and then gave it to Thomas Cromwell during their sort of friendship. And then when things didn't end well between those two, it was then given back to the crown. And when King Henry VIII married Anne of Cleves and then divorced, it was then given to her as part of the settlement. So there's real sort of rich history surrounding the estate. Now it's owned by, I believe the gentleman's name is Eric, who owns Knightimber and has created this brand that everyone knows. I'd say until probably last year, I hadn't really delved into English sparkling wine, and it's very early in the morning to be talking about alcohol. But we're British, so we must go on. But there is a real difference between sort of Prosecco champagne and English sparkling wine. And I think quite often everything that's not champagne sort of gets grouped to Prosecco, and that couldn't be further from the truth. I don't enjoy Prosecco. I rarely enjoy champagne. I don't think I've got to that stage yet of my wine journey, but I really do enjoy an English sparkling wine. If, like me, you're not the biggest fan of Prosecco, I would say give Knightimber a try, specifically their Blanc de Blanc. It's my favourite. I think the 2017 was the one we had the other day at the Vineyard, but I have had other years before and they've all been really, really lovely. Their classic cuvee is not for me. It's a bit too fizzy, so I like something a little bit more subtle. But honestly, I'll leave it linked down below. Give it an order for Christmas. I think your family will very much appreciate it. It's a really lovely product, and yeah, thank you so much Knightimber for inviting me to the estate. I really enjoyed myself, and I learned a lot for when we eventually have a house in Italy. So we'll see in a couple of years' time what happens with that knowledge. But as I mentioned, it's currently the morning, so I've just woken up, had a shower, made myself a coffee. I'm going to take Fenton for a walk now through the fields, and then Chad and I are probably going to head on into London and do some more shopping. We still haven't finished our autumn-winter shopping, and I would like to do a bit of home shopping for the coming seasons. So I shall go and finish getting ready, and we'll head on out for another day in London.